My dad said, we're not going to have 50, but maybe 100 people here. Well, I teach business administration, and I'm trying to help students visualize what they may be able to do in their lifetime. Because it's hard when you're a kid to think of achieving things. And I said, here in Waverly, we've got stories. We've got stories on farms. We've got stories in shops of people, heroes as I see it in business. They show up every morning. They put in a day's work. They deliver value. They're heroes. But it's hard to see those stories when you're a kid in college. Well, I felt Waverly had a story with the Shield Bantam Company, not just because I'm Wilbur's son, but because I'm in business and I see these things. So I felt there was a need for the museum to have a video, so that when a kid walked into that museum, instead of just seeing a piece of iron sitting there with a bucket beside it, they could understand the story. So there was a need, but I had two problems. The first one is, Wilbur is not Vern. If Vern had wanted, if I talked to Vern, hey, let's do a story, let's do a video. Well, sure, let's do a video. Talk to Wilbur. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I've been around him long enough to know that means no. But sometimes fate intervenes. And it was the president of Wartburg College that in my mind translated my dream into some reality in a very roundabout way. Because Grant Price, who I'll introduce in a minute, was trying to do a video on the history of Iowa broadcasting, and he wanted to get people that had been involved in Iowa radio in the 30s. And the president of Wartburg College, Vogel, mentioned Wilbur and Vern Shield. And so Grant Price interviewed Wilbur and Vern as a part of the history of Iowa broadcasting. And I saw how well my father got on with Grant Price. Because I had two problems, remember? The first was Wilbur is not Vern. The second is you need a storyteller to tell a story. And I'm not the storyteller. My dad's not looking to be the storyteller. You need a storyteller. And I looked at Grant Price and I said, we've got our storyteller. It took a little time after that to convince my dad to go along, but as you can see, we've succeeded. And so I want to turn the microphone over to our master storyteller, who looked at this project and said, this story deserves to be told. He threw himself into this project. He digested the history. He translated it into something that you can see in a video, worked with the students, put up with the family, who always had one little more thing they wanted to change, right? So, please welcome Grant Price.
I bring my own cue cards along with me. Could I see the person who brought this wonderful artifact of what we're talking about in here tonight? Would you stand, please, sir? And this, I believe, is the shields from Benton County. Who are you, sir?
I'm Big Shield John Shield from Belle Plaine.
From Belle Plaine. That's where the Shields family came from, folks. So thank you so much for adding this bit of color to what we're doing here tonight. And thank you both. Thank you for being here.
Vern gave that to me a few years ago, and he said, hang it up in your garage, and every time you get in your car, you'll think of me.
Well, there it is. Well, if you don't believe that's a magic word, just look around here tonight. It's hard to get people to come out and participate, I heard, someplace. Not here tonight. And I think the reason is because of the legacy that we're talking about. And I know many of you who are here tonight have had a hand in that legacy in one way or another. Let me just embellish slightly on what Milo has already told you about this very circuitous route that all of us took in order to get this project done. Back in the days when I was still a broadcaster, back in the days when there still was such a thing as public interest broadcasting, editorial. One of the charges that station executives had was to do ascertainment, that is, to ascertain community needs. And a part of that process was to identify community leaders within the viewing listening area and seek them out and go around and interview them. And I was involved in that process as the news executive, certainly. And so one of the ascertainment interviews that I lined up was with a man named Vern Shield. Of course, I knew quite a bit about Vern because he had been retired for many years then, and I identified him primarily with the self-help organization, that wonderful concept that he had for helping third world agriculture. And so I made the trip up to Waverly, and I found the windmill down there on Bremer Avenue, and that's where Vern was, not sitting in an office with a plush chair, but where do you think I found him? In the shop. In the shop. And I didn't find out a hell of a lot about community needs, but I found out a lot about self-help and that wonderful little machine that Vern had conceptualized and put into the mix of that organization. So I knew Vern Shield through that and some later involvement with the self-help organization, but I apologize, Wilbur. Vern didn't tell me about you. But trust Vogel, he'll get it done. And when we got into this broadcasting history project that we've been involved in here at the college, was sitting with Bob at lunch or something one day talking about that, and as Milo indicated, I said, I'd just really like to find people who were in that marvelous period in the early radio history where the owners were as cheap as they are today. Except they had a better reason. They weren't making any money. They were looking for people who would come in and entertain as long as they didn't have to pay them. I mean, that was literally true. So here comes these two brothers, the Limestone boys, Vern and Wilbur Shield, knocked on the door of the studios of WMT Radio in Waterloo at that time, and said, we entertain for the community. How could we get on the radio? And with all that talent standing in front of them, they said, absolutely. And so Vern and Wilbur were on WMT Radio for a couple of years as the Limestone Boys, entertaining weekly. So that wound up with about 45 seconds in the broadcasting history video, which lasted an hour. So we needed to do more. So when I sat down to interview Wilbur about that little vignette, as I sat with this man over there in the museum, I said, "This is a story." And that's my business, finding stories. So it's just been a privilege to put this story together with the assistance of some marvelously able young people. And that's what we're going to show you here tonight. The Limestone Boys and their small but scrappy band. Transformation of this collection of used parts into a machine spawned an industry employing 500 people with annual sales of $10 million in less than 2 decades. It is one of Iowa's great entrepreneurial achievements. However, it's not so much about a machine, known as Bantam No. 1, as it is a story about two brothers, rooted in the Iowa farm family tradition of hard work and rural ingenuity, who did what they could with what they had. Vern and Wilbur Shield came to Bremer County in the darkest days of the 1930s Depression, and they built a machine which revolutionized the construction business. It also left an indelible imprint on the community of Waverly and the state of Iowa. The Limestone Boys is the story of Wilbur and Vern Shield and the Shield Bantam Company. The machines which Shield Bantam manufactured at its Waverly plant and marketed worldwide were identified by the feisty Bantam rooster, which became the company trademark. The small but scrappy Bantam symbolizes the need filled by the Shield invention, a machine for its time. Equipment manufactured for materials handling and excavation in the 1930s was too large for small-scale operations, such as the limestone quarry just north of Waverly where the business originated. A smaller, mobile, versatile machine which could dig, hoist, and load was the niche which Bantam No. 1 and its successors would fill. Vern Shield made the first one, a drag line, to load trucks hauling lime from the quarry he and Wilbur operated. Demand for the little machine that could was immediate. When a neighboring gravel pit operator saw Bantam No. 1, he wanted to buy it. So Vern sold it to him and made Bantam No. 2, which he also sold. And so it went, until 20 years later, when the business was sold, it was manufacturing far more sophisticated machines and marketing 1,000 or more units a year across the U.S. and in places as far away as South Africa. The genius which sparked this American success story was a blend of two brothers with very different personalities.